live like no one else, so later you can live like no one else, right? I
Right,
love
right.
that quote from Dave Ramsey. I don't agree with everything Dave Ramsey said, but like that is the truth. Like if you don't make those sacrifices now, you can't ever get to where your investments are paying because you won't have investments. If you just spend all your money, you can't do that. If you don't work a little harder and increase your income a little bit to get some money on the side, you're not going to do it, right? Hello and welcome back to Last Life Ever. My name is Jeff Holst, and that is Jillian Sidoti. And today we're going to talk about The Wealthy Gardener, which is a book by John Soforic, right? And it is a book that we just recently covered in our book club. And Jillian and I like the book so much, we decided to do a whole episode where we reviewed the book. And I've already given it away. I like the book. Jillian, you also like the book.
I loved the book. I loved the book. This was a Jeff recommendation.
Clearly the best ever written. And I think this is the experience that most people have when they read this book. Because I read it, a couple of years ago and then reread it for the happy hour, right? Our book club happy hour that we do, which if you guys don't know about it, you should just reach out. We'll get you the information about the next one. But yeah, it's free and we do it every month. So we pick a book, we talk about it. You don't even have to read the book. You just show up and listen to us talk about the book if you want. But some of the people in our mastermind have been reading The Wealthy Gardener as well because we were doing it for the book club and a lot of them participated in it. And some of them just heard our discussion about it at the book club and decided, wow, they like it that much. I should read it. Like Hayden, former guest here, was just telling me in our pod meeting that that was just telling me in the pod meeting that he's listening to it now and he's like it's changing everything that I'm doing. It's even changing what he's tracking for his daily habits because it's that inspirational. And I felt the same way. I was like, holy cow, how come I didn't know? And I mean, I feel like right now what we're doing is we're just like talking about how great it is without giving concrete examples. But I think we should step back a minute and give the overarching idea. So the
Well, I think
overarching
there's yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I have some notes on this. I took some notes so I could be prepared for this conversation. But here's the four big huge things, and he breaks it down even further into like 55. I think it's 55 lessons. So there's 55 things he's basically saying you got to do in life. But if you go a step above those 55 things and look at what are those 55 things encapsulating, he's saying pursue your passions. You must become a lifelong learner. You must become a lifelong learner. You have to have perseverance. Nothing comes easy. And you have to have long term vision. And then all of these steps within that are within those things. Pursuing your passion, learning continuously, having perseverance, and having a long term vision. And part of it is, the perseverance part is he talks about going without and sacrificing at this time so you can have the life you want later. Now, for those of you out there that say, well, what if later never comes? Yeah, that's a possibility. That's surely a possibility. However, that's why you have to pursue your passion and have continuous learning so you're being fulfilled as you are pursuing um, these goals.
Yeah, well, right. So I think the thing about it is what he's not saying is not don't do anything you enjoy. Don't be miserable. He's saying make the sacrifices when appropriate to get the extraordinary life, right? Um
Right.
he quoted multiple times from all sorts of different sources. The guy's clearly super well read, but he talked about Dave Ramsey, and Dave Ramsey has this quote that I've always liked, which is, live like no one else so later you can live
Yeah.
like no one else, right? I
Right,
love
right.
that quote from Dave Ramsey. I don't agree with everything Dave Ramsey said, but like that is the truth. Like if you don't make those sacrifices now, you can't ever get to where your investments are paying you because you won't have investments. If you just spend all your money, you can't do that. If you don't work a little harder and increase your income a little bit to get some money on the side, you're not going to do it, right? So it's not
Right.
about working 150 hours a week. It's about stopping, reflecting, finding purpose, and then following out that purpose and doing the things that you want to do. I mean, he talked a lot about how he set aside time every day to be grateful for things, to be and even to be grateful for things that have yet to happen. Like he would
Yeah.
give an example like, his phone wasn't ringing at his chiropractic practice, and he would spend an hour a day being grateful that so many people were going to call him soon, right? I'm like, it sounds a little goofy when you say it out loud, but the reality is sometimes those things work. Sometimes just being grateful opens you up to opportunities. And it might be that the universe is rewarding you or God's rewarding you or whatever, but it also might just be it opens you up to figure out what you need to do to take the actions that are going to bring the
Yeah.
people there to call you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter why it works. It just does
Right.
work. And
No,
and I
and
think
he talked about other things too, like it's not just go, go, go. Like he quotes Grant Cardone, and I used to I worked for Grant Cardone for many years, and Grant Cardone is exactly who he says he is. But he tempers that. He says, "This is what Grant Cardone says. But by the way, you also need to meditate. You need to sit back. You need to rest. You also need to wonder, what is it that I really need in life?" And when you start making those assessments, you don't have to have constant hustle. Have some hustle. If you just have a little more hustle than the other guys, then you're going to
yeah,
realize that success.
well, yeah, and I think the thing is, it doesn't just tell us that because a lot of self help outs will be like, do this, do that, use this formula, say this, blah blah blah, right? Be motivated. But what he does is he tells it through a story, and the story
Mhm.
has some characters that are essential to the story, right? And some characters that kind of come in and out a little bit. And so there's a relationship with his neighbor and his neighbor's son. There's a
Mhm.
relationship with sort of a young person who got himself in trouble with the law, and he mentors that person, right?
Right.
And by putting it in this format, it makes it interesting. And he's able to weave in examples. The neighbor who never achieved his dreams because he was afraid to take action. The
Right.
neighbor's kid who is seeing how his dad's life turned out and following in a different path that's leading to an equally negative result. And then this child or young man who had gotten into trouble through a drunk driving accident that ended up in someone dying. That young man um, getting into a reform situation where he was learning about process and taking mentorship from an older successful individual. And and it's all told from the perspective of that mentor. The wealthy gardener is um later in life telling his story about how he got to where he was and then sharing that wisdom freely with his friends, his neighbor's kid, this young man that he's mentoring. um and by doing it that way, you get to see all these different perspectives in a really unique thing, and there's gonna be stuff in there that resonates with you. You may not be the wealthy gardener right now, but you might want to be that person. You may not be a person who committed a crime and caused someone's death, right? But we all have things we regret, things that we wish we hadn't done. And you might not be you might be in between there. You might not be, a criminal literally, but you might be a person who's aimless and like, unhappy in their career, like the son of the neighbor, right? So all of these things are out there. And I think it's really well put together. That to me, that's the key takeaway, right? Is it's just a really well put together book. So the thing is, like, when it comes to this like lifelong learning part of the book, which is clearly a huge part of it, right? There is something to be said about discerning what it is that you want to learn about and learning about the things that are useful to you. When you were volunteering at a school and teaching math, you wanted to learn more about education and educational theory and being prepared to be a better teacher, all of that stuff. um it's probably really useful anyway. Like, I don't think it hurt you to learn that. But to pursue the master's degree just to get the master's degree when you don't have any use for it, it's not like you're gonna go apply for a job where you need that piece of paper, right? Like, you're never gonna be a full-time teacher. That's never gonna be your role. Even if you are effectively a full-time teacher when you layer in teaching your children about values and about life, and layer in podcasting and layer in authoring books and layer in giving presentations. In a way, you are a lifelong teacher. But it occurs to me that um, that's actually a really good thing because I've noticed a long time ago that if I want to really understand a topic, I should teach it. Like, I know that sounds dumb because like you're like why would I want someone teaching me something that doesn't understand it? But every time I've been asked to teach on a topic, it doesn't matter what the topic is. If you ask me to teach on, how to plant acorns, right? I would have to research the crap out of it and figure out how to learn how to plant acorns correctly. I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? Um, I use that example because it's in The Wealthy Gardener that, there's a whole piece of the thread of the book that talks about the potential of an acorn in a large oak tree. And I think it's really interesting. But the reality of it is when I've had to teach on something, it's forced me to think through not like I know how to buy a multifamily property, but if I'm teaching someone else how to buy a multifamily property, I have to think through the steps and I get better at it as a
Yeah.
result of having to teach it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's true. It's true. I did this the other day. It's so funny you said that because I recently had to write an outline for a course for hotels to apartments, like converting hotels into apartment buildings. I didn't, I've only done so much of that. I've only invested in so many hotels and converted into apartment buildings. So I'm no expert by any stretch of the imagination, but this gave me an opportunity to kind of like flesh it out and think, what are all the things? And then you know what I did? I used Chat GPT to help me to fill in the gaps. And that was extremely valuable. So you can always cheat, guys. ChatGPT is a great way to cheat at life
Well,
in a good
so
way.
I mean, here's the thing, right? That's about continuing to learn. Like I found, um, we were playing around with this in Bali actually, right? So like the Chat
Mhm.
GPT thing, like I want to talk to someone who doesn't speak English in Indonesian, and I could use Google Translate, but Chat GPT, I could say, "Hey, Chat GPT, will you please explain to my taxi driver these are my goals? Here's the 7 things. By the way, he only speaks Indonesian, so will you first tell him that you're interpreting what I'm telling you and do that in Indonesian and explain to him what he wants and then push a button and it spits out a whole bunch of stuff that's indecipherable to me and the taxi driver nods and smiles and we get to go to exactly where we wanted to go.
This is not on the Wealthy Gardener, but one of the greatest things you taught me about using ChatGPT that I've now implemented in everything I do is instead of Google searching or looking on TripAdvisor, what should I, or like, what should I do, or what are the best activities in this area, is you just ask ChatGPT, you tell ChatGPT, so for me, I am traveling with 3 children. These are their ages. We're going to be in this place at this approximate location in at this time for this amount of time. Um, Please write me an itinerary of things to do.
I know it's really amazing, and there's so many things like that, and we can do a whole episode on ChatGPT later. I wanna stay focused on the wealthy gardener here, but I do think it is relevant because, we would not know about those things if we weren't continuing to stay inquisitive, which is one of the things that the wealthy gardener talks about, and I mean, honestly, s this book, like, we could take every chapter and make an entire episode on it. I swear. Like we'll have these one line, sentences, lesson 4.12, or whatever. And then it will have some like short allegorical statements and then it will tell you the lesson and you're just like oh my gosh that's amazing, right? And it's just like that over and over again. I mean it's actually really an unbelievable book, and so if you haven't read it, I would recommend the audible, but I think you could read the book and get maybe even more. I actually am thinking about going back and reading and highlighting the book, and it'll be my fourth time through the book at that point. But I really do think it is that great, and I think the story keeps you interested, and the lessons make it valuable. And it's a rare combination for those two things to work together. I can think of a couple of other books like that. You know, I think it's one of the reasons the Rich Dad was such a successful book. It's because it had a semi interesting story and it had some decent lessons mixed in. But to me, this is a better book than that. This is just really put together a lot. Yeah, and another example would be like The Richest Man in Babylon. That's another one that has life lessons sort of layered into an interesting story. I'd like to say, my book is a little like this too, because I put some interesting narrative in, but I have like real life lessons embedded in it. And I think that um, that's really the future of self help. And this is probably The Wealthy Gardener is probably the best example of it.
Yeah, not just that. It's funny you say that. But the thing that distinguishes this book from, to me, Rich Dad, is the author. I don't find Kiyosaki to be that nice of a man. I've met him in person, and you and I have talked about that before. But I also find Kiyosaki to be very, frankly, rude to his poor dad. I get where he's going. I understand, but I think there's got to
Yeah.
be just
So,
a
I
little more
mean,
respect
we can
there,
be
a little more of a broad view
critical
of
about
life.
that, right? Like he doesn't have, his poor dad is his actual, father, right? Like it's as opposed to his friend's father.
Right.
But his poor dad lived a life that was different than what Kiyosaki thinks we should live. And as a result of that, he purposely villainizes his dad in a little bit. But in fairness, he wrote it after his dad's death, and he mm, periodically throughout the book, I've read that book 20 times, right? Like, I mean, I really do like the
Right.
book. I know you're not a huge fan, but I really like the book. Um,
Well, it's mostly because I don't like Kiyosaki, and I don't like that. Like that's the difference to me with wealthy gardeners. Wealthy gardeners talking about, hey, you need to be not just wealthy for yourself. You need to be wealthy for your community, for
sure.
you
Um,
know,
yeah,
yeah, and you also have to look introspectively, and there's that. Kiyosaki in that book and as a person is devoid of that. And yes, I
yeah,
said
no,
that out loud.
I hear you. I mean, and I've also met Robert Kiyosaki in person, and I don't want to turn this into a bash Robert Kiyosaki thing. I think he's a guy who has a very unique perspective that doesn't seem unique anymore because we've heard it so many times, and he's a really good marketer. And I
Mhm.
think that he's done a tremendous amount of good. And I think the body of his work on the whole benefits the world. So I'm pro Kiyosaki, even if I don't want to hang out with him. I do agree with you. He's a little grumpy.
Yeah.
He's a little vulgar. He's not the kind of guy that I want to spend a ton of time with. But I shook his hand and told him thank you because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be right here right now.
Fair. Now, I'm going to turn and I'm going to say somebody else who's not very popular, who I think is exemplified in, or I mean, I guess it depends on who you talk to about whether he's popular or not. Who's like the wealthy garden exemplifies, and that's Elon Musk, right? So, like, if you want to look at the like all the world of billionaires or the billionaires in the world, if you look at Elon Musk is like steps 1 through 55 of the wealthy gardener. You know, he's a lifelong learner. He's constantly hustling, he's pursuing a passion and things like that. So, I mean, if you
Mm,
just wanna look to the most
well, yeah,
successful
but I
people,
would actually argue that a
yeah.
better example would be Richard Branson. Um,
Oh, Richard
Right,
Branson's
yeah,
like my
but
hero, though, you know that.
because Elon Musk has the, Kiyosaki hardness, right? Like, he's like, Elon Musk wants
Yeah.
people to be happy and healthy and rich. I believe that. He wants to benefit the world. I think Kiyosaki does too, though. Like, these guys are they are trying to teach valuable things to the world, right? But they're both a little
Mhm.
harsh, right? The criticism of Elon Musk is that people don't like working for him, that he's too demanding, that he's grumpy, right? That those are the kinds of criticisms about him. That he says things that are uncouth. These are the same things that you don't like about Robert Kiyosaki. I think the difference is you've never hung out with Elon Musk, so you don't know how much you don't like him.
So I gotta, hey Elon, you hear that? We gotta hang out. You gotta convince Jeff that you're not as grumpy as
But
Kiyosaki.
listen,
I
and
like how you put it agree on. Listen, listen, I saw Kiyosaki say to a man from the stage in front of an entire group of people. He asked a very reasonable question. The man asked an audience member asked a very reasonable question, and Kiyosaki from that stage said, "What are you fucking stupid?" in front of the whole
well, yeah, I
group
mean,
of
I was there
people to
too.
this
So
poor guy. Like he's
I
not a
mean,
nice
yeah, but I could
person.
see Elon Musk saying that to someone too. Like that's the thing. Like I mean, I think Elon Musk would say for that matter, I think I would say that to someone. I mean, like I just I
No,
think I
you would
might.
not.
I mean, sometimes people ask dumb questions. Now, in fairness, I was there. I personally thought that was a little over the top myself. But that being said, I have never met John Soforic, right? Maybe he would say that to someone. We don't know because we've
No,
never met
it
the
would
man.
not.
Like he also might be a whiny, complaining, grumpy old man. I assume not because
I
the
doubt
tone
it.
of his book
There's
is
no
different.
way.
But I personally think that you retrospectively read Kiyosaki's work as more negative than it is. I think if you never met Kiyosaki and you read his book, you would be like, wow, this is pretty good. Like, I think it's unfair to apply
No,
your personal
I read
experiences
his
with him to the valuation of the book. And
I always thought your dad's he's a teacher. It's an honorable profession. It's too bad he didn't learn how to build wealth, and he's just trashing
well,
him
he
all
says
over the
some really
place.
nice things about his dad too, though. I mean, I think I feel like you might want to go back and reread the book because I've read it a bunch of times. There's a lot of positive in that book. So maybe you should go back and read it, and then we'll do an
Okay.
episode on Robert Kiyosaki and and Rich
Oh,
Dad Poor Dad. We'll invite Robert to come on and defend himself, but we'll do that at a time. We'll do that at a time when we're talking about Kiyosaki instead of the Wealthy Gardener. Well, bring us back in. We got to wrap up this conversation, and we're going to finish up by talking about how great the Wealthy Gardener is and not how bad other people's stuff are. So yeah, go out, buy the book, maybe buy it on Audible as well, so you can do it both directions and help them doubly as much. Um, Now, I do want to leave us with one thing. All right, so Jillian, you've said 3 times I think on this podcast that we've read a ton of books, that you're a lifelong learner, that you read all the time, and I'm not disputing any of that. By the way, I typically read between 30 and 60 books a year, which is, I think, a lot of books. Like even 30 is a lot of books. That's a couple books a month, every single month, right? Um, and I feel like I read a fair amount. Now I know people that read 70 or 80 books a year, and always impressed me. My record, I track this all actually on a website because I'm weird. Um, but I met a person when I was in Maui who is this guy. I want to get him on the show. I'm going to reach out to him, but he is a Hollywood stuntman, a Hollywood director. He directed a film that was on Netflix recently. He's currently directing a film for Mattel, right? Like so, like he's a real deal kind of guy. He's a big name. And we were talking about books. And the first time I met him, he said to me, "Hey, I really like reading books. Do you have any recommendations for me? Like, what are you reading now? Like, and I mean, maybe he does this to everyone, but maybe it was because we were introduced as like, we're both going to be on the same podcast around the same time, and he figured that I might have some insight or something, right? And he didn't know me, and we had a conversation, and I found out from this conversation that this man reads 180 books a year. 180 books a year in addition to being a director and writing screenplays and being a stunt double. Yeah, I asked him that. Nope, not speed reading. He reads a couple hours every night and he listens to books constantly. If he's gonna go to the grocery store, he'll put on his headphones and walk to the grocery store and listen to a book. Yeah, on Audible. So it's not all physically reading, obviously, but reading a couple of hours every single day. Plus, anytime you're on a plane, reading. And he said what happened to him was he was reading his 30th book of the year or something halfway through the year, and he was figuring he did pretty good, and he was on set at a movie. He was a stunt double at the time, for Captain America, actually. Like he's Captain America's stunt double. That's pretty cool, right? Like so he's on set doing his stunt double thing, and there was a girl reading in the corner, and he was talking to her, and she was like, yeah, I read like 5 books a week. And he was like, "Wait a minute, I gotta up my game." And so he's upped his game to read 180 books a year, one every other day for an entire year. And he's on like I think he said he was third year in a row doing that. Whatever piques his interest. at the time when I was talking to him, he
Wow.
said he always has about 2 or 3 books going at the same time, one Audible, one more in-depth thing that he's
Mhm.
taking his time through, and then usually some kind of nonfiction thing that he's reading or something like that, right? Um, anyway, he told me at the time he was reading a book about character development. I can't remember the name of it, but it was just about writing good characters. I forget what it was called.
Jack,
Yes,
so
I
I
want
wanna
to
remind
remind
everybody
everyone,
of
Jillian,
something, if you
everyone,
don't
you
mind.
included, even Robert Kiyosaki, to live the very best version of your last life ever. Even him, we want to remind him to
Not
live well.
Kiyosaki, don't
Like he
listen to
might turn into a nice guy. You
I
never
do.
know
Yes, Kate,
because
start
it's
living the
important for
best
people to live
version
well.
of your last life ever.
So
I
make
know,
sure
I'm
you live the
waiting for
best
you.
version of your last life ever.